After the passing of a loved one, they enter a state known as the bardo, which lasts for about 40 days. This period is the optimal time for performing the rites of crossing over for the deceased. In today's video, I will explain how Buddhist practices can assist the deceased in breaking free from the cycle of reincarnation, and share multiple real-life successful cases of crossing over, demonstrating the powerful effects of these rites. Part I. What is the bardo state? The bardo refers to the transitional state between death and rebirth, meaning in between or intermediate existence. Buddhism posits that after a person's death, although the physical body has perished, the consciousness continues to exist and does not depart immediately. The deceased's consciousness, now unbound by the physical body, becomes extremely sensitive in perception and mobility. Thus, whenever someone mentions or thinks of the deceased, their consciousness can swiftly perceive and come to their side. This period is particularly crucial for crossing over rites because the deceased, often lost, desperately seek guidance and assistance. By reciting Buddha's name, chanting sutras, and explaining the compassion of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the beauty of the Pure Land to them, the deceased's consciousness can directly benefit, aiding them in a smooth rebirth or transition to the Pure Land. During the crossing over process, family members and practitioners, through sincere and pure-hearted recitation of Buddha's name and dedication of narrates, can not only provide provisions for the deceased but also enable them, in a state unbound by the physical body, to quickly sense these good thoughts, fostering faith and refuge, leading to a smooth transition to the Pure Land. This intangible connection and interaction are extremely important parts of the crossing over ceremony. Typically, the bardo lasts for about 49 days, but this is not a fixed limit. Depending on the deceased's karma and mental state, the duration can vary. During this time, the connection between the deceased's consciousness and their dead physical body still remains and is highly sensitive. Having lost the constraints of the physical body, their mental state is more chaotic and confused, often feeling fear and unease, unsure of where to go. Especially in the first few days, the deceased might not even understand that their physical body has died and will attempt to communicate with living relatives as usual until they gradually accept the fact of their physical death. Buddhism considers the bardo stage extremely critical because, during this phase, the deceased's mind is highly open and vulnerable to external influences, making it the best time to help them cross over. The bardo process can be divided into several stages. 1. The dying bardo, the stage when life is about to end, and the deceased's consciousness begins to detach from the body. 2. The Dharmata bardo, the early stage of the bardo, where the deceased experiences hallucinations and dreamlike visions with a very turbulent mind. The consciousness undergoes profound introspection, and karma manifests as various sensations. 3. The becoming bardo, the stage where the deceased gradually enters the phase of choosing their next life, guided by the pull of their karma to the next existence. In this process, reciting Buddha's name, chanting sutras, praying, and dedicating merits have a significant impact on the deceased. Due to the extreme sensitivity of the mind in the bardo state, reciting Buddha's name or chanting sutras and dedicating these merits can help the deceased maintain a pure mind, avoid the influence of negative karma, and ultimately guide them to smoothly transition to the Pure Land of ultimate bliss or a good rebirth. Why 49 days is the best time for crossing over? 49 days is a widely accepted significant period in Buddhist scriptures. Buddhist doctrine holds that the deceased experiences multiple stages of the bardo within this time. If continuous crossing over rites are performed for the deceased during this period, such as through chanting sutras, reciting Buddha's name, offering lamps, making offerings, releasing life, etc., it can help them eliminate misdeeds from their past life, accumulate virtue, and ultimately have the opportunity to be reborn in a good path or transition to the Pure Land of ultimate bliss. The traditional practice is for relatives to pray and chant sutras for the deceased on specific days like the 7th day, the 21st day, and the 49th day, with the aim of helping the deceased alleviate confusion and find the path to liberation. By understanding the existence of the bardo and the importance of crossing over rites, living relatives can more purposefully perform meritorious deeds for the deceased, helping them move from confusion to light, ultimately leaving suffering and being reborn in the Pure Land. Part 2. My real experience in crossing over my father-in-law. My father-in-law did not believe in Buddhism during his lifetime. Despite our repeated persuasions, he never accepted Buddhism. However, after his death in 2018, we still performed crossing over rites for him through reciting Buddha's name and explaining the Dharma, while praying to Amitabha Buddha and my grandfather to guide him. About 20 days after his death, my wife dreamt of her father returning home, expressionless, surrounded by darkness. We continued to recite Buddha's name and explain the Dharma for his crossing over, while praying to Amitabha Buddha and my grandfather to guide him. Another 20 days later, my wife dreamt of her father again. This time, his face was full of joy. We realized that our father had accepted the refuge of the Dharma and smoothly transitioned to the Pure Land. This experience profoundly made us realize the effect and power of crossing over rites. Part 3. Other real cases of crossing over. Case 1. A mother's story. Another well-known crossing over instance comes from a mother's story in the Sutra of the Past Vows of Earth Store Bodhisattva. The legend goes that there was a mother who did not believe in Buddhism and had heavy karmic obstacles, falling into hell after her death. Her son was a devout practitioner who, upon learning of his mother's condition, chanted sutras and prayed for her earnestly every day, dedicating his merits. After many days of relentless sutra chanting and praying, Earthstore Bodhisattva, out of great compassion, saved his mother, releasing her from the sufferings of hell and allowing her to be reborn. Case 2. The liberation example of a Pali during the Buddha's time. There is also a famous example from a Pali, a servant from the lower class during the Buddha's era. Although he was a servant, he practiced Buddhism devoutly and attained the fruit of an arhat. However, after his mother's death, he learned that she had fallen into hell due to her misdeeds. The Buddha advised him to help his mother by reciting Buddha's name and chanting sutras. Pali practiced diligently day and night, accumulating blessings, and eventually, his mother was liberated from the sufferings of hell and reborn into a good path. Case 3. A modern lay Buddhist's real crossing over experience. In modern society, we can also witness successful cases of crossing over. A lay Buddhist, after his mother's death, continuously chanted the Amitabha Sutra and recited Buddha's name for several days, dedicating these merits to his mother. A few weeks later, the lay Buddhist dreamed of his mother appearing in the Pure Land, looking peaceful and joyful. This was not just a manifestation in a dream but a true response indicating that the deceased had been liberated. The power of crossing over was demonstrated through devout recitation and sutra chanting, successfully helping his mother transition. Part 4. How to cross over loved ones by reciting Buddha's name, chanting sutras, and releasing life. Reciting Buddha's name, chanting sutras, releasing life, and making offerings to the Triple Gem are the main ways to help the deceased cross over. You can set a fixed time every day to recite Namo Amitabha Buddha or chant the Earthstore Sutra and the Amitabha Sutra, dedicating these merits to the deceased. Additionally, releasing life is an important way to accumulate merit, dedicating the blessings of releasing life to the deceased to help them eliminate karmic obstacles. The power of reciting Buddha's name. Reciting Buddha's name is one of the most direct methods, especially when a loved one has just passed away and is in a state of confusion. By sincerely reciting Buddha's name, we can guide them to recognize their situation and help them accept the guidance of the Dharma. The power of chanting sutras. Chanting the Earthstore Sutra can help the deceased escape suffering and accumulate blessings, which is especially beneficial for relatives with heavy karmic obstacles. Chanting the Amitabha Sutra specifically prays for their rebirth in the Pure Land of ultimate bliss. Releasing life and making offerings. Releasing life accumulates great merit, rescuing creatures from the brink of death. Offerings to monastics and almsgiving are also important ways to accumulate blessings, and these merits can be transformed into help for the deceased. Part 5. My wife's family's crossing over experience. Not long after the successful crossing over of my father-in-law, my wife dreamt that her deceased aunt, who had passed away many years ago, asked her for money. In Buddhist culture and folk beliefs, dreaming of a deceased relative asking the living for money is generally understood as the deceased needing help, especially hoping that merit will be accumulated for them through chanting sutras, reciting Buddha's name, or performing Dharma services to cross over their suffering. Such dreams often imply that the deceased has not been liberated in the afterlife and still has some unresolved karmic obstacles or desires. Therefore, they seek help from relatives, leveraging their practice or good deeds for liberation or rebirth in a good place. In this case, one can chant sutras or participate in Buddhist crossing over Dharma assemblies, dedicating merits to the deceased to help them eliminate karmic obstacles and achieve liberation. The next day, my wife chanted sutras and dedicated the merits to her aunt. A similar experience occurred with her mother, who passed away in 2013. At the time of her mother's death, we had not yet deeply studied Buddhism and were unaware of crossing over rites. After her father's successful liberation in 2018, I told my wife to have her father look out for the opportunity to guide her mother. A few years after my father-in-law's successful crossing over, her mother, who had never entered her dreams, also came, with a face full of joy. We realized that my wife's mother had also been guided, and her joyful expression in the dream indicated that she had also been liberated from the cycle of reincarnation.